When you begin to combine the professional libraries of, let's say, a staff of 50 to 100 people, you can begin to see the vast amount of resources and information. In a school situation, point 5 is next important in that the materials are easily shared. If one faculty member is looking for some assistance in an area, they can easily get material from another person who is just down the hall. It's a little bit more difficult for a parent to find a qualified person in which they can share materials if they have the materials in the first place. We have an excellent opportunity for team teaching going on in our schools to use the strengths of different faculty members in specific areas. Another point is that the traditional classroom setting is such that it stimulates class discussion. Teachers want class discussion. Teachers want questions. And as a result of this, we do have the tradition of questions being asked in our school situation. Another point that's very important to review very quickly is that the school reaches practically all of the children over a given amount of time. I think a real crime exists, if I could use the word crime, in our society, where parents struggle through sex educate their children, and if they have 3 or 4 children, they do an excellent job with those, and then they're finished. All that knowledge, all that experience is wasted. They have no more children to work with. This does not happen in a school. When we finally get people who are professionally prepared and have the experience in sex education, we can continue this for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. We can reach all of the people, or practically all of the children, over a long period of time. And then finally, the last point, the schools keep up to date. The schools have to keep up to date. Any teacher, and there are many of you in this room, you know this. You don't dare stand in front of your children and not keep up to date. If you don't, they're going to keep you on your toes and ask enough questions, and you'll be forced to go back and pick up necessary information to keep up to date. Now, these are the things that have occurred to solve the number 1 critical issue a few years ago, to get sex education in the school. Now, as so often happens, with the resolution of one critical issue, others come up. We have created, then, with school sex education, more problems for ourselves. We really have done this. In the symposium outline on the program, we have identified 2 other critical issues that we have to be concerned with. What is the problem? Question number 1. And question number 2, what is our role in solving this problem? Now, I think some brief amount of time is necessary to identify these 2 questions, to interpret them for you. When we ask the question, what is the problem, we're concerned with the schedule and sequence of sex education information. What are we going to teach, and when will we teach it? Now, it's easy to say that in one sentence, but when you start thinking in terms of putting a curriculum together, you've really got a problem on your hands. This is one of the problems we have. What are we going to teach, and when are we going to teach it in sex information? Now, it goes without saying that when we do set up our curriculum to answer this point, we take into consideration the needs, interests, comprehension ability, and dependency of the youngsters. We have to keep this in mind constantly. What do they need? What are they interested in? What can they understand, and what do they have to say about the problem? These 4 points may help you answer that first question. Then, the second question, what is our role as teachers or as school people in solving the problem of what to teach and when to teach it? And to answer this, we just simply can say that our responsibility here is how we're going to teach. And you answer the question of how you're going to teach in the area of sex education with these points. You gain experience. You gain experience in handling sex questions. How? By asking other teachers, asking your spouse, test questions with each other. You might be sitting down having a cup of coffee in a lounge, and you might tap somebody on the shoulder and say, Elaine, if I ask you right now, where do babies come from, how would you answer that question? Right now, answer it, because that's the way you'll have to handle that question in the class. You practice with each other. This is a technique you might use. We gain knowledge. I don't have to say this to teachers or people working in the schools. You do this almost automatically. You're constantly searching. I'd almost say, not being derogatory, you're scavengers for information. And I'm not being derogatory. I'm saying this in a complimentary way. You gain knowledge, and you've got to gain knowledge in the sex area. You discover materials. We hope that bringing you together at this meeting will give you an opportunity to discover some materials. With the pamphlets and models and things we have demonstrated for you, we hope that you get some ideas there. You explore and test methods. Of course, this can only be done in the classroom. You try different projects and different techniques, and we hope that you will show some initiative here on your own to want to do this. And in essence, what you do then is to become better teachers. You become better teachers in the area of sex education maybe than you were a year ago. This is what you've got to work on. Now, we've gathered on our speaking platform 4 people who have had extensive experience in answering these last 2 questions, these last 2 critical issues that we have proposed on our program. We've asked them to come here today and share this wealth of experience and knowledge with you. Now, in going over the backgrounds of these 4 people, I found a rather interesting situation. We've got 4 people, but we've got a variety of approaches. We have the approach of fatherhood. We have the approach of motherhood. We've got registered nurse approaches. We've got a school nurse approach. We've got the approach of a private practicing physician. We've got the approach of a school physician. We've got the approach of a coordinator of a school sex education program. We've got the representation from a private health agency that's involved in sex problems. And among all 4 of these people, we have vast amounts of experience at conference and public speaking on these issues. So we hope by the time we finish, we'll have something for you. Later today, you will hear on another approach, the religious approach, moral approach, from a member of the clergy. Now, before we get with our panel, we do want to indicate to you that there's going to be some disagreement. I'm sure of it. There will be disagreement between our panel and the audience. There will be disagreement between members of the panel. There will be disagreement between members in the audience. And the only thing I can say here is, fine, I'm pleased. I think this is a healthy situation. When we have disagreement, we keep reminding each other of one very important thing, and especially important in sex education, that there are no absolutes. We stop learning, we stop progressing, we stop helping the youngsters when we say this is the only way to do something. Keep this in mind. There is no one way. If you leave with any other idea but this one, we want you to, we feel that the conference has been worthwhile. Now, I'd like to introduce the first member of our panel. She is, first of all, a parent. I don't know if I should say first of all. She is a parent. Secondly, she's an RN. She's also in her RN capacity, registered nurse capacity, a school nurse, and specifically she's a Bearcat. She's at Muncie Central. I'd like to introduce to you Mrs. Mary Whitaker.
Thank you. I must talk about this being a Bearcat just for a moment. I have just become a Bearcat in the last 3 months. The funny part about this is the fact that my husband has always been a Bearcat, and I've always sort of been a armchair criticizer of this Bearcat fever. So I'm now a Bearcat, and I chaperoned a group of cheer block girls to Newcastle to a football game, and so on the way back they had a yell, she's a Bearcat, yay roll Mrs. Whitaker, and I thought, well, I'm officially a Bearcat now. Which I never dreamed I would be, and it's really not so bad. It's fun to be in the fever. I'm in a good school. We are here today as professional people, and I feel the underlying trend that we should feel today in selling the sex education in the schools or in any other organization where you will have contact is for you to have a feeling that you are doing the right thing. I'm not so sure that all people feel this way. They think, well, I think I'm doing the right thing, and I hope that everyone else agrees with me, but I feel the positive approach that you are doing the right thing when you start to introduce this, especially in an area that has not had a lot of experience here. This feeling will give you moral support and will be the underlying support that you will need throughout this education. Sex education needs to be introduced, as I said, by a professional person. This is you again. By a person who knows what they are doing. Because if these insecure people whom you are teaching come back to you with a question, you will need an answer with the assurance to them that you do know what you're doing and saying, and they will also feel more comfortable in this introduction. We must be willing to understand adverse opinions. Sometimes this is difficult. We think because something's right that everyone should agree, and this is not necessarily so, especially in sex education. We've done an awful lot of talking and a little bit of convincing. So the convincing still needs to be supported and continued. There are still people who are going to say, well, I don't know about this. In fact, when I introduced sex education to a parent group in one of the elementary buildings 2 years ago, I heard a parent say in the background who did not know me, well, I'm sure not going to want my boy to see this movie. This movie was Boy to Man, which is a well-done film and certainly well presented and better material than what I could ever introduce. But I thought, well, wonder what is going to happen. And nothing happened, believe it or not. The principal did not get an irate parents on his hands the next day. We introduced the film and showed it in 5th and 6th grade, and there was not a single kickback. We were a little bit insecure ourselves in whether this would happen. It did not. But I think, on the other hand, we were a little bit secure in what we felt we were doing. First, I think you have to let people know what you are doing and convince them. And the first person is the administrator if you are doing this in the school. Let your administrator know. Get his cooperation and understanding. Preview material with him. The next line is the parent. You must not ever go past the parent. Even if they do not know the material content, just the fact that this is going to be done is an assurance policy to you that they have had an idea that you are introducing this type of material. As I say, if you have security in what you're doing, the feeling that you are doing the right thing, I feel that you will get little or no kickback, and even if you do, you will be ready to support this rebuttal. You will be ready to have the answer.
Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker. I'm sure as a result of good planning, we prevent much of the kickback, and I know for a fact that that's the case in Mrs. Whitaker's situation. The second person in our symposium to speak will be Dr. Lillian Holdeman, the Director of Health Services in South Bend Community Schools, also a parent, and living in the shadow of the Golden Dome. I'm sure she's not a Bearcat.
You're right. She's from Michigan State. Neither am I a Notre Dame fan. I'm strictly for IU. Underdogs that they are. It's a pleasure to be here today. And just 2 days ago, I had a most interesting conversation with the little flunky that came to South Bend with our new superintendent. I really shouldn't say that. He's assistant to the superintendent. But he got a letter from Mr. Bradamus. And Mr. Bradamus in this letter, by the way, he is our esteemed congressman from our area. And never lets us forget all of the marvelous things that he's doing for us. He wrote a letter to Mr. Fitzgerald and said that the government is anxious, or words to this effect, to further sex education in schools, and for some reason or other, he hadn't heard anything about sex education in South Bend schools. If it was in the paper, he didn't see it, and so on and so on. And would we please write to him and tell him what we're doing in South Bend public schools sex education? Well, I am new to Mr. Bradamus. In my opinion, this is one thing you don't go to the newspaper, because we have abominable newspaper reporters in South Bend, especially the fellow that deals with school news. You give him a fair and honest appraisal of a situation, and what comes out in the newspaper is something you never even thought of, let alone indicated to the gentleman that he might put in the paper. We have been engaged, I'm sure, in sex education for much longer than we think. I do think it's getting easier all the time. Matter of fact, I remember the sex education I got in high school was it's all hush-hush. The girls are going to the auditorium for a meeting with a school nurse, and the boys are eager beavers wanting to know what this is all about. And all the girls wanted to know if the boys are going to get anything similar, and if not, why not? And wouldn't you like to be there too? So we have come a long way from this kind of teaching and sex education. Now, my particular role up here is perhaps just to get the ball rolling in some form or other. And I believe after arriving, I may have gotten the ball started a little bit too soon. What you have in your hands now is a resume of a talk given by Dr. Levine at the Public Health and School Health Conference back in about 1963. And the first portion, I have changed this a little bit, but not enough probably to be completely satisfactory. But I thought it would give you an idea of what he thinks and what I subscribe to that should be taught at various levels. I would like to put your attention, however, to the first page and say that in South End schools particularly, it's true, as the former speaker said, that, or I guess Mr. Cinnamon said, that PTAs or parent groups are very anxious that the school do something. As a matter of fact, we have been trying to fight these huge sessions of mother and daughter viewing a picture, a film, I mean, one or two of an evening, and having the school people feel that this is their total responsibility as far as sex education is concerned. And I would say here and now that if one is going to be successful in teaching young people anything at all about growing up and realizing themselves sexually, or knowing what sexuality really is, I think this must be done in small classroom situations. There must be a planned program, and it must be planned within another curriculum. For the most part, the elementary teacher does what comes naturally, I think, from kindergarten up to the third grade, and fourth, fifth, and sixth, and so on, as you'll read along. The question comes up, should boys and girls be taught together? I think they should be taught together absolutely as much as possible. Now, it is possible that boys don't need a lot of information about feminine hygiene or menstrual hygiene, but I think they certainly ought to know about menstruation. And I think when we overdo the separation of boys and girls, they're each wondering what the other one knows. And this, in my opinion, is not a very sensible kind of approach. Now, I heard Dr. Calderon, whom I know you have read in all the current magazines. She's written PTA, Good Housekeeping, 17. Look magazine, I think, had the first spread on her that I saw in a popular magazine. And she is executive director of the fairly new organization, SECUS. I mention this without fear and trepidation in front of Mrs. Jackson. She represents another very good organization. Actually, I suppose they are interested in essentially the same thing, except that SECUS, or the Sex Education and Information of the United States, is limited to furthering ideas or information about sex education. And this leads me to say we must decide what a sex education is. You know, a lot of people think that once they taught the reproductive system, or we've explored the pros and cons of venereal disease or illegitimacy, that we covered sex education, and this is not it at all. As a matter of fact, I like to think of sex education as being, first of all, human growth and development. And this takes in the whole gamut from birth to death, and included in this development is interpersonal relationships. Second would be reproduction, or some knowledge of the reproductive system, and the importance of having a family, being a family, what it means to, in other words, this is the family living would come in this portion. And then I would like a discussion of infectious diseases. Among these would be venereal disease. You know, infectious mononucleosis is becoming so common nowadays, and I don't think we're really going to control this, but on college campuses, this is known as the kissing disease. And while it is infectious, it's not quite as infectious as the venereal diseases. And nor does it have quite the a problem in control and in treatment. Dr. Calderon states that we need sex, if our premise is that we need sex education in order to lower venereal disease or the illegitimacy rate, that these are desirable byproducts, no doubt, but they are not the primary goal, which should be that we produce young people and adults who will use their sexuality in mature and responsible ways. Obviously, such a basic concept will include responsible parenthood, but this is also a secondary, not a primary goal. And she says in accepting the importance of sexuality as a primary goal, that we have to understand that sexuality is part of our total personality. She says, in looking up the word in the dictionary, if you have an old dictionary, it's not even in the dictionary, but she refers to Webster's New World Dictionary, where the term sexuality means the state or quality of being sexual. And she states that this is the important thing, to be glad and to act as though you are knowledgeable about your role as a man and as a woman. You know, Dr. Calderon is great for telling people that first they have to examine their own attitudes before they can begin to teach in this area. And I once heard her speak to a group of physicians in Chicago, and she began her talk by saying that it was the physician's responsibility to stand back of administrators and teachers in getting going programs in the area of growth and development, sex education, and so on. But she said, first of all, many of you physicians will have to examine your attitudes about sex, and I think it's since come out in the literature that doctors are not nearly as well informed about problems in sex education as educators are. And I think they're attempting to improve this in medical schools now, and I certainly think they must, because you know, the books used to say, well, to children, if you can't talk to your mother and father, go to your physician. And it's just too bad, you know, physicians aren't prepared for this kind of thing, too. I see my time is up. Oh, one thing I want to say before I go. You will note what Dr. Levine has stated on the primary level, K-3. You may not agree with the content or the timing, but I think over a long period of time that most of the things that he is saying here are very apropos. There's nothing worse than parents who say when their children are 13 to 16, I don't want my child to know this, or I don't want my child to know that. And this is where I think parents fall down really when it comes to sex education, because they do not accept their child as having any sexuality or as being old enough to know these things, and certainly by the time, in other words, I think they're poor judges of what their children need to know. Now, the first item where he states that children should use the same toilet facilities. Now, you and I both know this would be most impractical in most schools, because, you know, they say boys and they say girls, and never the twain shall mix, at schools anyway. And so that I would say that in most schools, that most kindergarten up to third grade children not be using the same toilet facilities. You'd have to cut the throats of most educators and architects if this were to come about. And you see, all the children come from different backgrounds, and this would not, in my estimation anyway, this would be rather impractical. You may have time to read through these. If you have further questions, I'll answer them later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holloman. I want to emphasize the last statement made by Dr. Holloman, that keep in mind, if you have questions, write them down, because shortly we will be collecting those. Our next speaker is the Executive Director of the Indianapolis and Marion County Social Health Association. And in her role as the Executive Director of this organization, she has traveled throughout the state, speaking in the areas of school sex education and venereal diseases quite extensively. 2 years ago, she was on our campus helping us out here in the venereal disease workshop that we had. And I introduced her as a woman that has done more throughout this entire state about sex than any other person I knew of. This time, Mrs. Jackson, I won't say that.
Oh, you mean that's it? I thought maybe you were trying to come up with
No.
Well, first of all, let's get this straight so that everybody in the room doesn't get fired. If you're going around and poke somebody on the back and say, now turn around and tell me quick where babies come from, and then send all the second grade boys to the girls' room and all the second grade girls to the boys' room, you might as well all quit now, because you're going to be fired. No, I mean, these are interesting concepts, and this is what we're here to examine. But what I would like to talk particularly about today, as a representative of the private agency, let's get this out of the way. I represent the Social Health Association, which is an affiliate of the American Social Health Association, and I think the general feeling of the American Social Health Association about Dr. Calderon and SICUS is that Dr. Calderon is 61 years old, and she wants to go out in a blaze of glory, and she's only got 4 years to go, thank God. She is doing a great work, there's no question about it, and she is a real bulldog. She makes me look like Mary Poppins. I mean, she is a real swinger. But I think she wants to get this done before she retires, and so when she's through saying sex education a go-go, and a few such things that set us back 10 years, we'll pick up the pieces and go on with our family life education program. And we'll be here to do it. So I don't mean to be bitter about it, but I think that she comes in, with this terrible emphasis on it, and causes a good deal of trouble in communities where the thing has been going along and growing, because this won't happen overnight. But things are happening. Now, my role this afternoon in this original presentation is to kind of bring you up to date on materials. And I find that this is a very pleasant task at this point. 10 years ago, it would have been an almost impossible task. As a matter of fact, I brought this little antique with me. This is the 1956 edition of A Guide to Health Education in Indiana Schools, the old clunker. Some of you probably have it on the shelf. And I took a look at it last night. I was not in on this, and many people were, and some of the stuff is very responsible. But the two films shown at high school level were The Old Human Reproduction. By the way, that for those of you who know that mother and father in the living room and that perfectly obnoxious, precocious 4-year-old boy who comes in with circles under his eyes, he hasn't had a good night's sleep in 3 weeks. And he's probably been worrying about where babies come from, because that's what he asked. And they go into this 30-minute discussion, and it's a perfectly great film then, I mean, it was supposed to, now it's been remade. McGraw-Hill has remade it, and it is a beauty. It really is. Take a look at it. The new human reproduction. They haven't changed reproduction any. They've just changed the film. But the setting is superb. It's in color. It's beautifully done. And we're actually taking this film down into, we used to make the break over there about 9th grade. But actually, when you're doing education down 5th and 6th grade level using human growth, I think you could bring human reproduction, the new one, very comfortably in 8th grade. It's a beautiful film. It's a beautiful job. And it certainly is a welcome addition. The other film used in 1956 was the old VD clunker, and this was really a gasser, called Message to Women. What they did with the boys, I don't know. There wasn't anything. Innocent Party was just about to come out, and this was being compiled. And Message to Women is the one where I took my copy of it and kept the doctor's lecture, which still is very good. The actual medical content on it is good. But the mother's reaction, she had, I will never forget the hat, one of those triangular things of purple felt with ostrich feathers wiggling on the top. And the doctor says, your daughter has gonorrhea. And she says, gonorrhea? And the feathers wiggle. I will never forget this. So I just took her out. I mean, I just got rid of it. We just forgot the introduction. And so then we went to the medical lecture. And then we were actually using this thing still 6 or 7 years ago. But look what's happened. Let's look at that. Let's start with the elementary materials. We have the film Miracle of Reproduction, which is still good. Now, the reason I'm so hep on these elementary materials is we at Social Health are in the middle of a terribly exciting project called the Pike Plan. There will be a story either tonight or tomorrow night in the Indianapolis News about it. I cross my fingers. I'm with you, Dr. Holdeman. And my father was a newspaper man, but I hope they don't louse it up too badly. And this is starting 3rd grade through 10th grade this year. We've been working approximately 13 months on this now, and we'll go 1 through 12. And copies of it are not ready yet because it's being formulated constantly. Every time we walk into a classroom, we get a little bit more. In other words, it's on a pilot, really. It's on a pilot study. But it's exciting. And, of course, in doing this, our timing was absolutely superb because the elementary materials are starting to come. Now, Miracle of Reproduction was the film that has always been around, and it's still at State Board of Health, and it's good. But in addition to that, The Old Human Beginnings, which was E.C. Brown Trust bought the rights to it and remade it, is now Human and Animal Beginnings, and it is excellent. I would say 3rd grade, 2nd grade, you'll have to work out your own programs according to your community, but this would be appropriate anywhere. And then there is now, you will have an opportunity, I think, this evening, if they're here, the whole Hank Neuenhouse series is here, including a 1st grade film called Happy Little Hamsters, which I have not seen, but it said, I read the teacher's guide, and I can hardly wait to see it, because it says it's an introduction to family life education, and the papa hamster comes in and fathers 6 or 7 hamsters and leaves. And mama's got her hands full. And it says it may bring out some, well, that's a heck of an approach to family life. But anyway, we'll see it, and it might be, it's evidently very good. So we'll all have a look, perhaps, together. There is a series of slides which is creating quite a bit of discussion now called How Babies Are Made. These are color slides, and they're put out by Creative Scope in New York. And the author, the creator, and the president of the company were in Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago, and I had lunch with them. Watch this series of slides. Always preview any material that you ever put on in school, but watch this series of slides very carefully, and take out the 3 that, you'll know which 3 they are. Unless you've got a awful sure situation, because they not only show how mama chickens and daddy chickens get together, but then they show how mama doggies and papa doggies get together, and then they put mama and papa in bed. And I would suggest that this would be inappropriate to the classroom. Now, if mama and papa want to get this series of slides on rental and take it home and talk it over with Junior, that's fine. That's fine. But I'd watch it. However, they're done in paper sculpture, cut out, and they're very good. They're very good. But just be careful you get those 3 out, unless you know exactly what you're doing. Careful of your setting on that. Now, other elementary materials. As you know, of course, Boy to Man and Girl. There is a companion film now to Boy to Man called Girl to Woman. I just ran Girl to Woman with 187th grade boys this morning. I just came from teaching. They had already seen Boy to Man, so we reversed the film. We were working separately. At certain ages, I still prefer to work in separated groups by sex. When you're discussing the personal puberty and hygiene and development, seminal emissions and masturbation with boys, menstruation, hygiene in depth, not just, I think that the kids are more comfortable, and I think you get more questions when they're separated. And if it's simple, it's either. When you put them together for human growth and development, fine. Then they're working on a basis of their own personal knowledge. It's just pretty hard to get a 7th grade boy to discuss seminal emissions in front of a 7th grade girl. As a matter of fact, I think it's darn near impossible, except to find out what they are. But today now, we must have spent 15 minutes with 57th grade boys on what will happen on seminal emissions and masturbation. And I don't think that you can do that when the girls are around. But that's just my own experience. And of course, when I go in to teach, it's a little different because I come as a visiting resource person. I'm not a member of the faculty, and I also want to get a great deal done and some of this basic stuff done in a relatively short time. So perhaps that would change my way of looking at it. So the Girl to Woman film is great. Now you've got a perfect, because we're just about out of menstrual films. Somebody will pop with a new one pretty soon. But we've got about 3 or 4 good ones. And the Disney film is still around, and we're still using it at 4th grade. The Disney film, fellows, is the film that uses dogwood blossoms and pink bassinets and bridal gowns, and never talks about what really happens, except to show an animated drawing which looks like Niagara Falls when the whole thing really starts. And this is sort of supposed to convince little girls of what's going to happen to them from 13 to 47 is not going to be a nuisance, which it is, and this is kind of a snow job that they start out with. But it never tells them anything about what they want to know, like what will I do if it happens in school, and how am I going to get out of the room if I have a man teacher, which is the most important thing they want to know. And there's only one way to tell them that if you ever get this question. Just say, it doesn't make any difference whether it's a man. And they say, but he doesn't know about things like that. And you say, you just go up to him and you say, Mr. So-and-so, I wish to be excused for a very personal reason. And she'll get excused faster than she ever got excused in her entire life. She'll be helped to the door if he gets the message and told to go find the first woman teacher that she can find quick. And that's all right. Gets her out of the room. That's all that's worrying her is how am I going to get out of the room? Because that tough old Mr. So-and-so, he won't even let us go to the bathroom. You know, well, anyway. So, we have good menstrual films. Now, the girl-to-woman thing is kind of hygiene, too. Then Human Growth, which many of you, if you haven't seen it for 3 years, was remade 3 years ago. They changed 19 words. It was such a superb film. It was so great when they made it way back in 47, but that's all they changed. Now, venereal disease materials should start 7th or 8th grade if you possibly can get it done. And now we have the film that opens the door on that. You see, we had the story films with the string section of the New York Philharmonic back there pumping it out, and the mother weeping, and the father trying to beat up the boy, and this is all very great, and these are normal human reactions, and I'm not making fun of them. But it's pretty hard to get that into a 7th grade classroom, previewing it with parents, because of the sexual involvement, the necking in the backseat, the things that are in the film. But 250,000 teenagers is a straight health approach. It's just 16 minutes of health teaching that you would have to do otherwise, and it does a beautiful job for you. No story at all, but presents it as a problem of 12 to 19-year-old children, which venereal disease is, and the rate is going up again. There are 2 counties in this, Dr. Cochran will probably speak to the rate here, but 2 counties in this state that I know of, where as of July 1st they had as many cases this present year as they had by December 31st last year. In other words, that means a doubled rate in young people under 20. So here we go again. All right, high school materials are almost endless. There are so many good ones. After you get through the human reproduction, and you can go into Worth Waiting For as a fine film. I think some of these are on your fact sheet from our agency. Phoebe is a new McGraw-Hill film about an unwed pregnancy. I don't know how many of you have seen it. It's controversial in some areas. I think it's a superb film. It's a kind of a way out film. The kids love it. We started it at Sue Emma Coleman Home for Unwed Mothers, which was someplace to preview it, and because we lecture there regularly. And these girls' comments I thought were probably the most valuable comments we could get. They had already been through this, and they said, be sure when you use Phoebe, it leaves her. They were weak. Some of them were weepy, and they said it leaves her there with that terror. Be sure to tell her there's someone to help her. And the film doesn't do that. And that was a sound comment. There's somewhere to go besides to an abortionist. And be sure that you never use Phoebe, but tell those girls that. Now that's from the girls themselves, the 7 months pregnant girls. And so I like Phoebe, and I think it's good. Now you never can tell. The Indianapolis public school system at this point, well, you talk about terminology and this deal being sold. Our supreme optimist here, which is great. We're now trying to get some venereal disease education in the Indianapolis public school systems, and the last report as of last Thursday was, we still don't think it's the thing to do. Of course, I've taught 5th grade children where there were 8 cases of gonorrhea sitting in front of me under treatment. We don't think it's the thing to do. Can you find us another name for that? We don't want to say sex education, and we don't want to say venereal disease. So I said, all right, social problems. They said, well, we'll try that. So we may get it. So it isn't sold all the way. But they bought Phoebe. So I don't know. Phoebe's the way outest thing you've ever seen. But they won't teach VD in the 7th grade. So you have problems with school systems still, I think. But I found out that the lady who has charge of most of the audiovisual auditing is very shook up about unwed pregnancies. And she's missed so-and-so, and I don't, well, I think it all explains itself. But, so these are some of the new materials. Now, as we get into if you'd like more information, because I'm out of time here now, we have more information on textbook materials. The textbooks are waking up, did you know? About 6 years ago, they asked for a textbook in family living. This was a leading publisher, whom I will not name, and there were two words that they did not wish used in the text book for family living. One was sex, and the other was menstruation. Nobody wrote the book. Now, Lippincot's out with a sex education pamphlet that goes with their health series. Lyons and Carnahan have a beautiful elementary series, and in grade 6 you can have either the chickens or the babies. They have an alternate 6th grade book. You can either teach children how chickens are born or how babies are born, whichever you want to teach them. And they're both good. I don't know how you can teach the chickens without getting around the babies nowadays, but maybe you can. And Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston have commissioned Mr. Julian and me, and we just finished rewriting. Matter of fact, the manuscript is in my car, the final manuscript, of modern sex education, which will go along with modern health, and hopefully will be here April 1, if we ever get it done. It's been a job, but it's good. And they haven't censored it yet. Of course, heaven knows what will happen to it. The curriculum guide, the old funker, the next one, and the one that's coming next year, we're working on. B.C. Bland, whom many of you know, Mr. McClellan from the State Board of Health, Mr. Belmer from Arsenal Technical High School, and Mrs. Steenauer, who's doing the very little onesies, the Child Development Specialist at the State Board of Health, are all members of my committee that I'm chairing for the revision of the Family Life Education section of the new curriculum guide and adding a complete venereal disease section. Dr. Holdeman, by the way, is working on the same guide in communicable disease. No, is that right, Lillian? Have I got it right? Communicable disease, cancer, and so forth? And so we hope that we're going to turn out a product that will be certainly much more on the ball. And this won't do the job. But remember, when the superintendent says, who else is doing it and how do I know it's all right to go ahead, here's the State Department of Public Instruction saying, this is how to do it, go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. I would like to emphasize the fact that handouts brought here by Mrs. Jackson from her agency are available. If you have not picked those up, make sure you do so. The material she indicated to you, plus many more, are written up. And also some of the films that Mrs. Jackson mentioned to you will also be shown after our sessions are finished here. Any of you that would like to remain after the presentation, films will be shown in 3 different locations, so we'll be able to show many in a short period of time. Every once in a while, the community is fortunate enough to have a person in it, like the next one I'm going to introduce. A person that is not in a school, has no direct connection with the school, but sees problems and wants to do something about it, wants to do something about them so badly that they volunteer time and services to no end. And that's the kind of person I'm going to introduce next. A private practicing obstetrician here in Muncie, who is given freely of his time speaking in sorority houses, in dormitories. We were able to get him on tape, on TV. He has spoken at many of our meetings, conferences, and has volunteered his help once again today. I'd like to introduce Dr. Robert Cochran, Muncie obstetrician.
It's a pleasure to have a chance to speak to you teachers and educators again. I think the reason that most of us in our field of medicine get interested in this particular field is that we see the problems. We're the ones who sees the pregnant girl, and we're the one who sees the venereal infection and need to treat it. So we are aware of the problems, and perhaps if we have a little heart about it, we get concerned. I'll say that most of us wish we had a whole lot more time to give to the type of thing that's needed in the schools. But we can be helpful to you. Children and some of the students that we have in the schools give us a little status. Maybe we don't deserve it, but we get it. They still seem to be impressed by the fact that a physician is going to speak to them. Makes a difference. There are many things that I can say to students that the teachers might be criticized for themselves. I can say things in your classroom, if I'm invited there, that you can't. I can say some things that your principal might give you a fit about in some schools. I've seen schools where principals block sex education in the school. You might be criticized by your school board. But you see, when I come once in a while, when I get a chance, I don't care what your school board thinks. And I don't care about your principal. If he's good enough to let me get in there, if he happens to be someone who would block it, I still say what I think. So there are things in the class that I can say. Also, we aren't faculty. The students don't see us every day. They get used to you. You're the people who say things to them all the time. And when we come into the classroom once in a while, they are interested because we're different. Not different in the way we're built, but we're different people around them. Also, we can reinforce your statements. When a student is told something by the teacher, I always like to remember when my kids were going to go to school, and I think we spent months warning them that when they crossed the street to be sure and look both directions, that a car is liable to clobber them. And the first day they came home from school, every one of them would come in and say, "Boy, did we learn something today. When you go to cross the street, look both ways. The teacher told us." Well, this is the time when the teacher was new. In this instance, we can reinforce what you're saying. We can say the same thing that you say, and to them it's important because we are someone who's different. And I want to speak to one of our speakers here said that we have to watch out for the parents. Well, I agree that this is true. We want to give the good parent every opportunity to be a good parent and not go beyond him. But in my experience, we don't always have good parents. And once in a while, someone's got to go beyond some of the poor parents and educate these kids something about sex. They just don't get it in many instances. And I think that for someone to come into your class and reinforce your statements and to get across the truth is important. And I think that the physician, if you can get him to get enough time, and as I said, I wish we had more time, why, we can be helpful to you. Your texts, as some of you have mentioned, are improving. Every day you'll get better ones. And I have a text that I am teaching a class from that I think is one of the best texts I ever ran into. I see one of my previous students here in the front row. But Dr. Trainer, who wrote this book, in the beginning of it, he makes a couple of paragraphs that I'd like to read to you, if you don't mind. I always hate people who read, but this is too good to leave out. He said that we should go back into the school curriculum at the grade school level and begin to teach the essential nature of man. We need less time, if necessary, with toothbrushes and the preservation of teeth, with shampooing and the elimination of dandruff, and even with washing and the use of deodorants. We need more time to bring the fruits of the wisdom in the humanities and the knowledge of the psychologist to the everyday level of the young human. We need a decalogue for human behavior that can be grasped by the youngster, can be tested by him, and can prove itself as a better way to live with his classmates today and his wife tomorrow. If we are going to live in a world of increasing numbers, we will have to learn to live better as humans in a common enterprise, or we shall all end slitting each other's competitive throats. For this beginning, we need to increase the education. We need to learn as young boys and men that young women are not a vagina endowed with shorter legs to reduce the running speed. We need to teach them that young women are first of all young humans with dignity, intelligence, and the capacity for judgments. We need to teach them that young women need the same things as young men: to be respected as persons, to be loved, to have a confidant, to get their share of attention. We need to teach them to seek joy, give joy, and be delighted with life. We need to teach them that they have all the human common properties, male or female. We need to teach the young women all these same things. They need to learn to be functioning humans relating to men, and to bring their human qualities to the men. They need to learn that their role is not just running fast enough to get caught. They need to learn, above all, that the apparent strength, energy, and independent purposefulness of the male depends in the long run entirely upon their female capacity to support it, meet its needs, and keep it running. If they do not learn this, all they have is a vagina.
Thank you, Dr. Cochran. Well, you've heard.
Okay, in the family life
There's
classes,
a family relationship class. that they
family
have.
relationship classes,
What class level?
could you tell me, would that probably be seniors in high school? Well, I'll assume it's a high school class. At any rate, as a matter of fact, it doesn't make any difference what level it is. My 7th grade, we spent every 7th grade boy in those rooms this morning, the classes I taught this morning at Pike, asked about the pill. They'll all ask about the pill. The 5th graders will ask about the pill. Some of their mothers are on it. And the thing I think that you must do about birth control information, and I still feel this way, in a public school setting. Now, I'm speaking of a public school setting. I'm not speaking of a parochial school where you know, in other words, you have a control group. I'm speaking of a public school setting. I think the smart thing to do is to avoid any technique, any discussion of technique. A very, not an evasive way, but a comfortable way of handling this, I find, is there are ways of planning families. None of them is 100% perfect. However, one of the modern ones that we hear about is the pill. Now, there are other methods. Now, all of these methods are something that you will discuss when it comes time for you to start your own family, when you become ready to be married. You should have spiritual counseling, and by all means, you should have a complete medical examination, both of you entering marriage. And this is something that you will discuss then in the light of your own family, your own religion, your own aesthetic taste, your own beliefs, and the possibility, because some women can't take the pills, of course. But I think that if you'll just you'll find that what they really want to know is, at the lower levels, the junior high levels, what does the pill do? And I answered this morning, I answered it 5 times, it keeps the egg from leaving the ovary. Now that's as simple an answer as you can give, but that's what they really want to know. Does it kill the sperms, or does it keep the egg there, or what happens? How don't they get together? That's all they really want to know. So that, I think, is enough of an answer on that. Now, the main thing is, though, I cannot stress this too much, the kids are getting the pills. They don't know enough to take them on schedule. Boys are giving girls a pill on a date and saying, let's go. I don't know whether we like this or not, but it is happening. And I think that it's the same thing that we ran into in our courses when we ran into the saran wrap thing. The saran wrap being used as a prophylactic. It had severe effects in the vagina because of the chemicals. And we paced the floor. Don Ward was my assistant. Should we talk about it? Because, you know, you never know whether they haven't thought of this yet. And you don't know whether to say it. But when you found the infections coming, then we talked about it. This is injurious. It's ridiculous. It's silly. Don't. On the pill, it must be prescribed under a physician's direction. And there are many different kinds. And I think you should make it clear. When you see as I do at Sue Emma Coleman Home, 3 out of the 27 girls the last time, because they took a pill, and 1 girl borrowed a pill of her mother's, and they're both pregnant, the mother and the daughter. Then you don't think anymore. You say, I think they should know this. Now that's my opinion on it. Doctor, would you like to comment, or either physician?
Go ahead.
Well, go on. Good.
Well, I think it's important also. I mean, I think that you must explain that you have to take the pill longer than one time.
Now I'm speaking of a public school setting. I'm not speaking of a parochial school where you know, in other words, you have a control group. I'm speaking of a public school setting. I think the smart thing to do is to avoid any technique, any discussion of technique. A very, not an evasive way, but a comfortable way of handling this, I find, is there are ways of planning families. None of them is 100% perfect. However, one of the modern ones that we hear about is the pill. Now, there are other methods. Now, all of these methods are something that you will discuss when it comes time for you to start your own family, when you become ready to be married. You should have spiritual counseling, and by all means, you should have a complete medical examination, both of you entering marriage. And this is something that you will discuss then in the light of your own family, your own religion, your own aesthetic taste, your own beliefs, and the possibility, because some women can't take the pills, of course. But I think that if you'll just limit, if you'll find that what they really want to know is, at the lower levels, the junior high levels, what does the pill do? And I answered this morning, I answered it 5 times, it keeps the egg from leaving the ovary. Now that's as simple an answer as you can give, but that's what they really want to know. Does it kill the sperms, or does it keep the egg there, or what happens? How don't they get together? That's all they really want to know. So that, I think, is enough of an answer on that. Now, the main thing is, though, and I cannot stress this too much, the kids are getting the pill. They don't know enough to take them on schedule. Boys are giving girls a pill on a date and saying, let's go. I don't know whether we like this or not, but it is happening. And I think that it's the same thing that we ran into in our courses when we ran into the saran wrap thing. The saran wrap being used as a prophylactic. It had severe effects in the vagina because of the chemicals. And we paced the floor. Don Ward was my assistant. Should we talk about it? Because, you know, you never know whether they haven't thought of this yet. And you don't know whether to say it. But when you found the infections coming, then we talked about it. This is injurious. It's ridiculous. It's silly. Don't. On the pill, it must be prescribed under a physician's direction. And there are many different kinds. And I think you should make it clear. When you see as I do at Sue Emma Coleman Home, 3 out of the 27 girls the last time, because they took a pill, and 1 girl borrowed a pill of her mother's, and they're both pregnant, the mother and the daughter. Then you don't think anymore. You say, I think they should know this. Now that's my opinion on it. Doctor, would you like to comment, or either physician?
Go ahead.
Well, go on. Good.
Well, I think it's important also. I mean, I think that you must explain that you have to take the pill longer than one time, and I think you're going to have to elaborate a little bit about what the pill does. It interrupts the normal cycle of ovulation, and this can be temporary or not. And I think that just to give them a little sketch of a bit of information is not too helpful. Now, you can go in most public restrooms and get prophylactics or safeties, and I think that if they ask you terminology, you should know what they're talking about. And this, I think, would not be discussed except at the high school level. But I certainly think you shouldn't avoid it and say, this is something we don't talk about. I think you must explain types of birth control in terms of they're chemical or glandular, such as the pill is, that there are mechanical barriers.
Second question that was asked was directed to me, and I'm going to direct this to some of my colleagues tomorrow. Why did you change the topic from the one printed on your program? I didn't think we changed it, but I guess I'll have to answer that. Family living education is a broad topical area. We're talking about one tiny aspect of it. We haven't changed it. We're talking about a specific problem area within family living education. Now, I don't know if that question doesn't satisfy the person or if there's more that we need to talk about. Whoever asked the question, I would like very much for you to see me between dinner or during dinner or any time you can catch me in a hall or something of that nature. Family living education is a broad topical area. What we're talking about today is one aspect of it. Another question that's asked to the entire panel, I think I will direct this to Mrs. Whitaker because she probably is closest to this. I'm just guessing. What is the role of the school counselor in sex education? And as a school nurse, I would venture a guess that Mrs. Whitaker does an awful lot of counseling. Would you care to comment on that, Mrs. Whitaker?
Well, I think we have to clear up first the role of a school counselor. Now, some school counselors are guidance people in the sense that they set up school programs. I think most of us, without thinking too much about it, think that school counselors are people that the children go to because they have a problem. But it's not personal, it's program problems. So we are going to expect a lot of a school counselor if we send a child to this person with problems. And we are doing this, and we are expecting a lot of school counselors in this area, but I'm not so sure that they are as well as prepared in this area as we might think they are from their title. So let's be careful about what we expect of a school counselor. Let's find out first what they're qualified and what they're willing to do. Some of our school counselors are educated to be guidance directors, but might renege somewhat on taking a problem that they might not know what to do with it. Now, I'm talking about personal personalities. Do you understand what I mean? Some people might reject counseling on personal matters. I think that it is coming, however. What is the role of the school counselor in sex education? I'd say first is a professional person to answer questions that are asked of them, to give constructive answers and supportive answers. If they have a particular problem that needs extra help with, I think they certainly are the person to go on with this. We all have limits. I think we, as professional people, must recognize our own limits. If we must call in a resource person or make a referral, this is our obligation. A referral to a physician, to another person, that might be a resource person. But I feel our biggest responsibility is to answer the question with what we know, with the knowledge we have and experience, and then not hesitate to make referrals if it is necessary.
May I say one thing about
Yes.
it? Actually, realistically, I find in schools that the role of the school counselor in sex education is that he has the shelf in his office where they put those books.
Might be a counselor for the teachers. Another question asked is directed principally to Mrs. Jackson. I would also like to refer this to Dr. Cochran and Dr. Holloman because there are some medical implications involved here. I'd like your comments concerning the showing of, quote, normal birth to high school girls, boys, and or a mixed class of seniors. The film Normal Birth.
Oh, well, do you want to speak to that, Drs. Holdeman and Cochran?
I'm not familiar with this picture. We have one generation to generation, which is, I suppose, very much the same, and we do show this to mixed groups. Now, I beg your pardon?
It's a medical film about actual childbirth.
Well, I mean, so is
Yep.
generation to generation, except it's quite a lengthy picture to show, and the average time allotted for a classroom. We don't seem to get too many repercussions about this, even from the students themselves, mainly because I think they're prepared for this kind of thing. Now, I think if a teacher just automatically, or in a class situation, or in health education class, would say, now we're going to see a film about normal birth, where they had not in the class led up to this kind of presentation, I think you might find some boys and girls who would not necessarily react well to this kind of thing. But I can see no objection to this at the high school level. I would never separate high school students for any kind of teaching that I would do at high school level.
If this is a senior or a high school deal, I would have no objection to showing any good, honest picture on the birth of babies. I don't see how it could possibly be wrong to show it. If it's a good film and it's sound, biologically sound, I'd show it just as easy as pie. I do think that it should be let in. I mean, you shouldn't start out your class that way. But I think that if you let into it, I don't see any objection to it at all.
I have personally used this film and others similar to it, and I've got two reactions on that question. Number one, the film is out of date. Film is out of date not from reproduction content, but it's out of date in the dress and the appearance of the people. So if you use the film, and the film is still excellent to use for the birth process, but prepare the youngsters for the film to be out of date. When they see 1947 clothes, they howl, and it takes 15 minutes to get them settled down, and by then the film is over. So prepare them, mention to them, the clothing is out of date. You can see how your folks dressed 20 years ago or something like that. Bring this out in the open in the beginning, and then it's not funny to them when they see it. So if you use a film that's out of date clothing-wise, automobile-wise, and I still think it's sound to use them if you prepare the youngsters for the joke that they're going to see. The second thing is, I agree with Dr. Cochran that they should be used with proper preparation. I did run into one negative reaction. I used the film with college freshmen, and I would say I had about 70 or 80 people involved in various experiences with the film, three classes, and I had a discussion afterwards in writing from the students because I was wondering how this went over, and one girl indicated as a result of seeing the film that now she did not want to have a baby. That bothered me.
Okay, now I'd like to speak to this, and I think we better clarify this thing right here and now. Let's don't get out of here, this room, without knowing what we're saying. We're talking about two entirely different films. Generation to Generation is an art film put out by the Maternity Health League in New York for prenatal clinics and conditioning. It is a beautiful film, and I think it's appropriate. The actual film, either Normal Birth, or let's bring it up to date, the one that you're having the experience with now, is the one that the civil defense people have, which is about the actual delivery of a baby. And the civil defense people have tried to take this into some health classes, and I think it is completely 100% inappropriate at any high school or elementary level.
We have it here on campus. In fact, it's on my shelf. It's listed in the library catalog. But we think it's so inappropriate that we want to know how it's going to be used before we let indiscriminate checking out on it.
I will not use it.
It's in color, emergency childbirth, and it even splashes a lens when the amnion sac goes. It's that realistic. She gives birth on a ping pong table.
I don't think
It's appropriate for the place where it would be used, and that is with professional people in civil defense, because they're going to be making emergency deliveries. But if you try to take a film like that and show it to your 7th graders, I think you could be in trouble. We had a graduate psychology major walk out of the room when we were previewing. He couldn't take it. No background, we just showed it for previewing purposes. When we saw it, we put it on the shelf, restricted use only. If you want to use it under those conditions, we'll be happy to talk to you, make it available. I 100% agree with Mrs. Jackson on that film. That's a hot one. Because it's not set up for a 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade class.
There's no film of actual childbirth is really, even the normal birth or the other, I think. Don't talk quite so close to the mic.
Hurt you?
Somebody's got their ears ringing.
Okay. This question was directed to myself. What courses are provided by Ball State to prepare teachers to teach sex education? I'm happy that question was asked, because I personally and our entire staff have felt very strongly about this entire area as long as we've been a section and department on this campus. I think I can answer this question in several ways. From a content point of view, our personal hygiene classes emphasize it strongly. We've got 2 of these, one for prospective elementary school teachers and one that anybody can take in general. We spend a good amount of time on human reproduction, sex education, from the personal problem point of view, the person at that age level. A critical issue for them is freshmen in college. Second, a factor that we're concerned with would be in our a course that we have entitled School Health Practice. It too is a required course for elementary majors, and we spend a significant amount of time in this course showing you where sex education is to be included in the school program. We spend a good amount of time talking about methods, materials, what to teach and how to teach it. It's a professional course for juniors and seniors that we have included in our curriculum. We have also on our course list course we call Human Development. It's a combination course. It's got 2 titles, Human Development and also Family Health Education. Is that right? Health in a Family. Got it confused a bit. This course goes in great detail. It's an entire course on family life education, human development in itself. And Dr. Cochran has taught this course one time for us. I've taught the course myself, I think, on about 3 or 4 occasions since we have introduced the course. If you're interested in this, I'll make a commercial. It will be offered in the evening next quarter, during our winter quarter, and scheduled for that course is Dr. Cochran. We'll fill that class up. So he'll be handling that course. We've got one next quarter if you want some help. And I'll assure you the fact that Dr. Cochran does an excellent job. This is just to mention a little bit. We smatter it in our curriculum throughout.
I have a concept to clear on this question that was asked me, what is the role of school counselor in sex education? I was thinking on the individual basis, and as I thought about it more, the question might have been directed as to the broad program basis. I feel that if the school counselor, if this person is here and has been exposed to what is needed in the school, should maybe investigate the program of sex education in her building and be a resource person for sex education materials and what is going on in her building. If there's a lack of it, she should introduce it. If it is adequate, she should support it.
We've got 3 questions remaining. I would like to handle them because I think they're important to talk about, but about 30 seconds each, okay? Mrs. Jackson, does discussing masturbation encourage kids to try it? What's your experience?
My experience would be, as with anything else to do with sex education, is definitely negative. It does not. If you approach masturbation as, firstly, the things that will not do, because they've heard the old men's tales, and when the lights go out at camp, they've talked about what it's going to do, the awful things it will do, the things that it will not do. However, if it becomes a habit, it is a negative habit. It is a kind of an I love me thing. It is a stage through which you grow, and it is definitely detrimental if it becomes a real habit. However, as an occasional experience in growing up, it is not going to be a definitely detrimental experience. That's the way I handle it, and I would think it would not encourage it.
The last question that we'll ask is, was asked by 2 people, but we think we can put it together in one question. One was, should VD be part of sex education? And the other is asking the question, why VD in sex education? That is a negative approach, don't you think? Why not put VD where it belongs in communicable diseases?
Dr. Holden, you take that one. I would agree with the latter approach. The Health Education Department, the American Medical Association, always puts venereal disease education with communicable disease education. However, hardly can a teacher be involved in teaching something about sex education that the question doesn't come up. Well, what about, venereal disease or gonorrhea, syphilis? I've heard this term, or it's some of the more common terminology. So naturally, I feel a teacher must ask the question. We actually have some high school health teachers that are trying to teach communicable diseases, including venereal disease, before they are sure that their students understand very much about the reproductive system. And I defy any teacher to teach anything about venereal disease without the student first knowing about the parts that are involved in the process, in the disease process, parts of the reproductive system. So this becomes rather a question that I think you have to decide for yourself. If it doesn't come up and you would rather postpone it until the time when you're talking about communicable diseases, that's strictly up to you. I would not put it at the beginning of any unit on family living or any unit on human growth and development, but it can well be a part of it. Now, as to the negative aspects, I don't think this, again, is an individual approach. We lived through the days of early, well, let's say 20, 25, 30 years ago, 35 years ago maybe, when we felt that it was not right to teach about venereal diseases from the standpoint of fear or the horrible looking slides and pictures that we used to show that long ago, 30 years ago. However, I think sensible caution and fear based with knowledge, there's nothing wrong with that. And I would say that the films and the instruction that is available today regarding venereal disease does give it a more factual approach. And I think with the use of some of the other films that we have, like Dance Little Children and The Innocent Party, the student can also get an idea that this is a public health problem, and that certainly there's a lot of individual interaction with other people. And particularly this film, Dance Little Children, you get the feeling and the attitude of certain parents regarding teaching sex education or venereal disease information in the schools. I think that's all.
I mentioned the Schwartz, you wanna mention the
Oh.
Schwartz handbook, since we've got it?
Yeah, since we, are on this subject, I think all of you should have, it's cheap enough, $2, I think. The teacher's handbook on venereal disease education, there's also a student's manual. The student's manual is $1. The teacher's manual is $2, and you get this not from the, where it was published, but from the, American Association of HPER, Health, Physical Ed, and Recreation. It's a department of the NEA at 1201 16th Street, Washington.
It too is
It's on
on,
that list of
It'll be
venereal
on-
disease
yeah,
teaching
mhm.
aids that I gave
And a
you.
copy of it is out in the hall too.
Yeah, and this is really, I myself feel that every teacher should have the manual. Whether or not you go through this kind of program learning for the student is strictly up to you. I wouldn't give 2 cents in a bushel for this, but because you see, if you give the right answer, you look to such and such a page. If you give the wrong answer, look to another page. And I don't care for games like that when I'm trying to learn something. And to me, this would be distracting if I were to have students use this in the classroom.
The time has come for us to end the symposium. We're running into time difficulties. I'm sorry that we are, but we are. I'd like to summarize very briefly some of the points that were brought up. That in order to have an effective family life education or sex education program, we would include the following points. First of all, that it's a part of the regular health education curriculum. We cannot emphasize this point enough. Going from kindergarten through grades 12, you cannot teach sex education in 5 minutes. You cannot teach sex information, attitudes, and philosophies in 1 hour. It takes a lifetime. The second point, the placement of specific items of content would be dependent upon the children, their needs, interests, comprehension ability, and their ability to do something about their problems. Thirdly, it should be presented as a normal part of the school program. We've got a minor disagreement on this point among panel members, but I want to emphasize it's a minor disagreement. Depends on what the situation is. If we're in a case where a mixed group is best, we should do it. If we're in a situation where separating them on a basis of sex is best, that's what we should do. There's no question at all the school administration must support the program. They must approve it. You've got to start with them very often. Another point, that the teacher must be properly prepared, must be up to date in their material, be able to obtain the necessary materials. In-service preparation courses are available. In fact, this is an in-service type preparation. We want to emphasize that the most valuable courses, the most effective programs are those where there's mutual respect among the people responsible in the community for planning them. We want to indicate that the teaching, when we get right down to it, the teaching, the firing line work, the teaching must be done with a tenderness and a personalness, including such things as individual responsibility, including morals. If you want God, not only the impersonal, physiological, or biological approach. Several of the speakers have indicated that sex education is much more than just teaching facts of human anatomy, and we would want to emphasize this point. Finally, I'd like to close with the idea that in 1 hour and a half we couldn't possibly solve the problems of the world, the state, your communities, but we do hope that we've given you some ideas to take back to your schools and your communities, and that you will try to put them in operation. We also feel that if you run into any problems or difficulties, you write any of us, we'd be very happy to work with you in solving your problems. I've got a few announcements to make before we adjourn. I'd like to take this time now to take care of them. First of all, if you haven't registered, please do so. If you haven't seen the display material, it's in the hall right out here when you go out the door to your left. Much of the material is available for you to take home. If there's a doubt, ask. Restrooms are across the hall, across the registration desk if you have to visit the restroom. We've placed Mrs. Jackson's fact sheets, the one she talked about, just outside the forum room door, so they're right here available as you leave. We want to thank Mr. Jerry Woolen from the Indiana State Board of Health for bringing his display and materials from the Indiana State Board of Health. We want to emphasize once again that the films will be shown after the dinner. Some of the films that we talked about today. We're going to have about 20 minutes to 25 minutes, a punch hour for you to visit with each other and with any of the speakers if you have specific questions. And we also have summaries from last year's conference available on the tables for you to take with you if you'd like to take a look at those. We want to thank you for being a good audience. Good luck in your programs.